Now remember that question we did earlier where we divided by x minus 2, got an answer, and divided that answer by x plus 2 and broke it down even further? Well, here we get 2 for the price of 1, meaning, aren't these together, if I multiply them together, x squared minus 4. So if I divide by them together, it's like dividing by each one individually, one after the other. Please notice I can't use synthetic division here because this is x squared. But again, our divide step for long division, we ask ourselves what times x squared is x to the 4th, and that's x squared. And I put that in the x squared column, that's what I do. Then I multiply, and I get x to the 4th. There's nothing there, and then I get negative 4x squared. Then my subtract step. Of course, anything from itself is 0. Subtracting zeros doesn't get me very far. Be careful. Negative 13 minus a negative, which is plus 4. Negative 13 plus 4 is negative 9. And then we bring everything else down. And if we can bring down, we do the whole process over again. The divide step, what times x squared is negative 9x squared. It's negative 9. Now don't worry about the signs about subtraction yet. Just make sure you make the same thing here. That's the divide step. We're not doing the subtraction step yet. Then we multiply negative 9 times 9x squared, of course, is the negative 9x squared. That's why I chose it. And then negative 9 times negative 4 is a positive 36. There's nothing in the x term. So that's my divide and my multiply step. Then I subtract. Anything from itself is 0. Subtract zeros is 0. Anything from itself is 0. Nothing to bring down, so I'm done. And notice the x squared minus 9, if you remember from the previous example where we did the x plus 2 and x minus 2, one after the other, I still get the x squared minus 9 in the next step. And so then here is our thing that's being divided, the dividend. Here's what we divided by, and here is the quotient or the answer. All right, so now we're dividing this by this. Using the factor theorem, if I get 0 by plugging in 4, then x minus 4 is a factor. But if I plug in 4 and work it out, I get 75, which is not 0. Therefore, I show that it is not a factor. It doesn't go in evenly. So, since we're going to talk about this idea of a remainder, let's do long division so we can see the remainder. So what times x is 2x to the 3rd? It's 2x squared. Multiply. Subtract carefully and bring down. What times x is 5x squared, and that's 5x. Multiply. Subtract carefully and bring down. Last time, what times x is 20x, and that's 20. Multiply. Subtract carefully. Of course, 20x times 20x is gone. Careful. Negative 8 minus a negative 80 is a positive 80. Negative 5 plus 80 is a positive 75. So what's interesting is that if I plugged in the 4, I got 75. When I did long division, the remainder was 75. You think that's coincidence, or this will always happen? I'm thinking, you're right, it always is going to happen. Now let's say that we liked the area model. So we put the divisor here, x minus 4. In this case, subtraction, the sign shows up. Don't get them confused. This is what, well, we're going to come up with for our quotient. So remember, we want to make the 2x cubed, so this becomes 2x squared. And then 2x squared times the negative 4 is negative 8x squared. Then in the red, we have to make the negative 3x squared. So this has to be 5x squared. So that's the third step. To make that 5x squared, this had to be 5x. Remember? And then I multiply the 5x times the negative 4 to get the negative 20x. This is good practice before your quiz and test. And then this term has to be missing, the x term. So if I have a negative 20x here, this has to be a positive 20x. To make that positive 20x, we have to multiply this x that's already here by this 20 that we have to provide. And then multiply the 20 by the negative 4 to get this negative 80. And before we were done, that would be the last term, but because that's not 0, we go one more step. And the last term is supposed to be 5, or negative 5, isn't it? So this has to be 75. And the number that makes this a negative 5 is the remainder. So we can see that this was 2x cubed. The red gives us our negative 3x squared. The green gives us our 0x. And the light blue gives us our minus 5.